Our first speaker today is the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the Sun-Times Media Holdings. Sun-Times Media publishes the Chicago Sun-Times, along with 7 suburban newspapers and over 40 weekly newspapers, all serving communities across the Chicago market. He joined the predecessor company, Sun-Times Media Group, in early 2009 as interim CEO and chairman of the board, and led the organization through bankruptcy and the sale of the company's assets to a new ownership group. Our guest today graduated cum laude from Harvard College with a Bachelor of Arts in Economics. While at Harvard, he was the business manager of the Harvard Crimson. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeremy Halbreich. Jeremy, come on up and we'll get your second speaker. Thank you. Our second speaker today is the publisher of the Chicago Sun-Times. He is also president and publisher of the company's Pioneer Press newspapers, a collection of 32 weeklies in the Chicago area. He began his career as an assistant editor at Crane's Chicago Business. He is a graduate of Fenwick High School. After Fenwick, our guest today earned his bachelor's degree in journalism from the venerable Marquette University. Our guest today and his wife, Maureen, where are you? Maureen, are the parents of 2 beautiful daughters. Ladies and gentlemen, John Barron. Jeremy, it's all yours.
Jay, thank you very much. It's wonderful to be back here with the City Club. I hope many of you will recall that we did this, I guess about 18 months ago when the company was just coming out of bankruptcy, and we use it as an occasion to sort of share with you our plans and strategies going forward. So it's nice to be back. I know I'm fortunate to have, John and I are fortunate to have a lot of our associates here from Sun-Times Media. If folks, 2 made it a name, so if everybody would just sort of raise their hand so everyone else will know that you're here, thank you. As I look around the room, I think I see most of our investors from Sun-Times Media, so I, by definition, need to be on my best behavior. And of course, Tony Hunter and Jerry Kern and a number of their associates are here, so I really have to be on my best behavior. Not many people know that I am, the Tribune's single largest customer. So we have a wonderful relationship. So Tony, to you and your crowd, thanks for joining us. And that wasn't code for anything. That's because we outsourced our distribution to the Tribune, and so we work very closely on that together. I know that many of you who are here today were very close friends and good acquaintances of Jim. So I think it'd be remiss if we didn't start off by sharing with you just how extraordinarily bittersweet it is for us today at Sun-Times Media. We were all deeply saddened and shocked by Jim's sudden passing. I think all of us knew, certainly anyone who worked closely with Jim, who knew Jim, that Jim was very, very sick. But I think it still came as a shock to so many people because it was Jim. He had beaten similarly tough odds and worse odds in days past. He was fighting as hard as anybody imaginable could fight the circumstances he was dealing with. I was fortunate to have spoken with Jim just the Friday before his passing. He was planning on leaving the hospital. He was already talking about going into rehab the next week. He sounded stronger and more energetic and more enthusiastic than he had in probably a good couple months. And as everyone knows, when I use this expression, it was Jim. It was Jim being Jim. And so it's been a difficult time for us in that regards. At the same time, we owe just an incredible amount of credit and thanks to Jim. because the Sun-Times today, much to his doing and much to his inspiration and his energy, is today stable, it's healthy, and we've got a variety of very positive developments underway, some of which I'll share with you shortly. Jim was the one who put our investor group together. He was the inspiration behind it. He's the one with whom 18 plus months ago we crafted a business plan and a strategy and some of the tactics that we're still using today and using very successfully, and we will obviously continue doing that. From a financial perspective, and I know this is a question that has come up regularly since Jim's passing, we are in absolutely fine shape. We're in good shape. Not many people know, I don't think I'm sharing any state secrets in telling you, Jim was not our largest single investor. There was a small handful who had actually invested more in the company than Jim himself had. There's no need on the part of the company to replace Jim's invested capital, and so we are in as good a shape as we possibly can, and again, with much credit to Jim and his vision and his energies on our behalf. Our investor group remains very committed to our mission, very supportive of our continuing the execution of the plans and the strategies we have in place, and they remain a very cohesive and supportive group. We've been together 18 plus months, and the marriage seems to be working very, very well. So our plan really for Sun-Times Media remains the same as this group heard in late 2009 when the new company emerged from bankruptcy. And the strategy is very simple. It's two parts. It's taking our traditional business, what everyone knows as print on paper, and ensuring that it remains profitable, stable, but certainly adjusting to the realities of newspaper publishing today. 18 months ago, I think I regaled many of you with stories about how profitable these newspapers used to be 5 to 10 years ago. I'll repeat what I told you back then. Those days are over with. They are not coming back. There's too much competition, electronic and otherwise. It's a new era for newspapers as we know them. But your traditional publications can and still will be profitable. While they remain profitable and stable, we also have to face the realities that they have been for the last 5 years, not just at Sun-Times Media, not just in Chicago, but across the U.S., a steadily declining revenue business. There's just no way to avoid that. Once we were into the first 6 months of that trend, the first year of that trend, the first 2 years of that trend, I think many of us in the business thought, well, if we just hold our breath a little bit longer and cut expenses a little tighter, maybe we'll ride this one out. Folks, we ain't riding this one out. It is the reality that we all live with today. So what we, along with so many others in our business, are doing as quickly and as dramatically as we can is shifting resources, allocating resources to digital platforms as quickly as possible. So in our case, we've installed new technologies. 18 months ago, I told you about a new content management system we were putting into place. We were about to start putting into place that for the first time in our company's history would unite under one technology platform all of our newspapers, the 8 dailies and all the weeklies. That's in place and it's working. And it's working well, and it's allowing us to do things from a flexibility, staffing, creative point of view we simply would never have been able to think about previously. And this is a growth component of our business. We are actively hiring people. We are shifting people from our traditional areas and moving them into digital areas, and we will continue to do that as dramatically as we can. So as demonstration of some of our progress, I'd share, I think, a few highlights with you. Scarborough Research, which is sort of the main source of readership data for our industry. Again, not just for Chicago, but nationally. They've been around for many years. Just recently released a total audience reach set of statistics. In Sun-Times Media, when you look at all of our publications taken together, ranked number 6 in the country. That's a whole lot higher than this group of publications had ever been before. Yes, number 5 was the Tribune. That shouldn't come as anyone's surprise. We were only 2.3 percentage points behind them, which from our perspective, folks, is really, really good progress and something we are really, really proud of. part of the progress, and I want to give the Tribune the backhanded compliment they deserve, but I also want to take credit for everything we obviously deserve. When you think about online readership, you not only, since it's the internet, you're not only appealing to and hopefully attracting local Chicago-based online users, but it's the internet. People can come from anywhere around the world. The Tribune, with their well-founded reputation, this should be no surprise to anyone, does extremely well when you look at international and national viewers to their site. But when you look at local users, people in the Chicago DMA, according to recent statistics from ComScore, we actually lead them. And so part of the reason we rank number 6 in terms of total print and online reach domestically is because of that strength. And obviously, we're going to continue to play that hard and continue to do the things that have earned us that standing. The other interesting development that's underway is the Audit Bureau of Circulations, which is the national standard bearer, if you will. It's the auditing firm that counts and verifies the number of copies sold, both print and online, for newspapers and magazines across the country. They're actually based here in Arlington Heights. Recently adopted a new rule that allows paid publications under common ownership. So in the case of Sun-Times Media, think not only Chicago Sun-Times, but also our other 7 dailies and all the Pioneer Press weeklies on Thursdays, to present their numbers to advertisers and to advertising agencies as a single number. And obviously we are jumping at the opportunity to take advantage of that. What it does, and the numbers will be released literally tomorrow for the first time, Sun-Times had been sitting at number 19, just the Chicago Sun-Times itself as a paid publication, sitting at number 19 nationally amongst the leading newspapers in the U.S. This will vault us to number 10 in the U.S. Along with a handful of my associates from our advertising department. I was in Dallas about 5-6 weeks ago at the annual Publishers Conference. We had an opportunity to present this new positioning to a group of leading national advertisers all across the country, and the story really resonates. They see it as a great way to buy more in-depth and to cover more of the Chicago market than heretofore they have, quite honestly, from the Chicago Sun-Times alone or from the Chicago Tribune alone. And so we like to see it as a big win-win. And for us, it's going to be an extremely exciting development. We also told you 18 months ago that from a product point of view, for the Sun-Times, we were going to focus on a very small set of elements, and we were going to remain focused on those things. Nothing was going to distract us. We were going to focus on local, 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 because that's what we do best, especially with our group of over 40 publications that you've now heard about. We were going to continue to emphasize our great sports coverage. We were going to continue to emphasize and invest in our watchdog and investigative journalism. And we were going to continue to support and highlight our incredible group of local columnists. We do lots of other things, but those are 4 things we are definitely going to remain and keep in the forefront. Obviously, we have good news there. I assume most of you heard that a couple weeks ago, we were fortunate enough to receive a Pulitzer Prize for local reporting. And while I don't want to steal any of my friend John's thunder, for those of you not aware, Pulitzer Prize, at least as far as newspapers is concerned, awards prizes into 14 categories. This year they had over 1,500 entries. Local reporting typically is the most competitive because every newspaper does local reporting. Not every newspaper has the resources to do enterprise reporting or investigative reporting. And the way the process works is all the entries in a particular category go to a panel of distinguished journalists who select not the winner, but select the final 3, the best 3 in their judgment that particular year. That group of 3 then goes to the board of the Pulitzer Prize Foundation, which again is a group of very distinguished journalists from across the country, and they decide the winner. So it's a very selective process. It's an important process. It couldn't come at a better time for us especially from the perspective of how we have now positioned Sun-Times Media. And before asking John to come up and share a little more detail and insight around, and color around all that, I think the one final thought I would leave you to sort of come full circle is there is no one who would have been more excited or more pleased or more proud of our having won this prize for local reporting than Jim Tyree. Thank you.
I just want to begin by saying that I graduated cum laude as well. Not from Harvard, but certainly from the Harvard of Milwaukee. So I am also amazed always at how fast everybody's able to eat here. There's not a single clinking of dishes at this point. The way you guys meet deadlines is perfect for the newspaper business. And I'm noticing that some of you even have food on your ties right now. Like I say, you're perfect for the newspaper business. Before I begin, I wanted to expand a little bit on what Jay was talking about with some of the programming coming up here at the City Club. I want to kind of formally announce a new partnership that we have with the City Club and the Chicago Sun-Times. We're now going to be sponsoring some of the programming here in coming months. We're going to host, moderate, or populate some terrific panels with some great guests. One of the first that we're going to be doing is an expert panel from the Sun-Times assessing the first 100 days of the new mayor. We're going to treat that like he's the president. It's going to be amazing. Look for that on September 7th, and I think you've got a notice about it on your tables. We're also developing a way to provide links from the City Club's vast archive of videos. Most of these programs have been videotaped over the years, and it really is a who's who in Chicago. You know, just a great treasure trove of wonderful speeches and presentations. It resides right now on the City Club website, but we want to move links to it to the Sun-Times website so we can provide an even greater audience for what has gone on here over the years. So we're very excited about this partnership and a lot more to come on that development. As this date approached, I, of course, was thinking about what to say. And I thought it would be much easier for me and probably vastly more interesting for you if we had a Pulitzer Prize to talk about. So I ordered one up, and it arrived at the perfect time. I want to talk about that part of our amazing odyssey in a few minutes, but first I wanted to set the stage as to where the Sun-Times is right now. The short answer, lest anybody think otherwise, is that we are here. We are here, and we are here to stay. Thank you. Feel free not to hold your applause at any moment. You know, we're here, and that may seem obvious unless you remember that just 2 years ago, this very week, we entered bankruptcy. And now we're here, safe, sound, arriving on your doorstep or at your favorite outlet every day. And according to the Pulitzer Committee, we are the providers of the best local news in the country. We are the little newspaper that could, except we're not that little. For many of us long-timers on the staff of the Sun-Times, the Pulitzer inevitably made us take a deep breath and finally take stock of what's been accomplished in a very short period of time. It's pretty amazing. But to do that, you also have to really get a feel for what has gone on at the Sun-Times over the years. You really need to put the entire enterprise into perspective. And as I was thinking about it, I realized the Sun-Times offers a kind of microcosm of world history. Stick with me here for a minute. Let me take you back in time. We had our classical period in the 40s and 50s and 60s following our founding by Marshall Field III. We now, of course, call him Marshall Macy's III. There was the golden age under Jim Hogue in the 70s when the Bright One won a slew of prizes and conducted spectacular investigations like the one involving our own bar, the Mirage. We served up incredible evidence of corruption along with the drinks. Then came the Dark Ages, when Rupert Murdoch briefly owned us during the early 80s. Believe it or not, I met Mr. Murdoch on Saturday afternoon in Washington, D.C. And I told him that even after all of this time, we still talk about him at the paper about once a week. I think he thought I was being complimentary, but After Murdoch came the lengthy Middle Ages, and that's when we settled in during the 80s and early 90s under a couple of lackluster owners, and they certainly understood the power of the Sun-Times, the power of the paper, but they thought that investment was a way to describe what a priest is wearing. Then of course, came Conrad Black and David Radler, a.k.a. the Inmates. They introduced the largely inexplicable Canadian epoch, which continues to baffle historians and just as it baffled employees. And that was gloriously followed by the revolutionary period in which the Canadians were sent north or otherwise put on ice. During the ensuing Reformation, we went through bankruptcy. No fault, certainly, of the journalists or any of the current management. It was just one of those things that had to happen. But make no mistake that during all this time, the paper was still the paper. You guys were reading it along the way, and it was still the paper. The quality and personality of the Sun-Times has always managed to withstand its owners. Then, finally, thanks to our hero and saint Jim Tyree and the terrific group of investors he put together, many of whom are here, we can say, we're here. Finally, we had owners who are good for us, and bonus, we like them. Now, back to world history. Since these guys took over in late 2009, things have really speeded up. In short order, we've had the Renaissance, we've had the Enlightenment, and now we've just passed through modernism with all the technology, and now we're well into postmodernism. We've got plenty of Facebook pages, and some of us even have gotten tattoos. It's been an amazing, jostling ride that I've been fortunate to have been part of for the last 16 years, and many of you have been along for that ride with us as well. In that time, we've always done our jobs, stirred the pot, shone the light, and stared down the odds. Along the way, lots of strange things have happened. We've faced boycotts from all sorts of racial and ethnic groups. You can't believe the number of famous people who have hung up on me. Bill Daley twice, and he called me both times. Despite the fact that my brother, the priest, lives with the cardinal, His Eminence refuses to have the paper in his home. All in all, I figure it shows that we must be doing something right. Along the way, we've done a lot of great stories, obviously, and we've had a lot of fun. One of the fun things we really like to talk about is while all this is going on, the Obama White House has requested a stack of Sun-Times to be delivered to the West Wing every day. And we have been glad to do it. It is quite a trick, as you might imagine, but we've pulled it off, and I guarantee you that on some days the White House gets better delivery than Berwyn. About a year and a half ago, as Jeremy said, we stood here before you at the City Club in a quasi-fragile state. We had just emerged from bankruptcy. We had some new wings, though, thanks to Mr. Tyree and his team. We were ready to fly. That was great for us. But more importantly, we were able, I think, to remind everybody, not that you didn't need much reminding, that Chicago remains a much, much richer place thanks to having two very strong editorial voices in town. We're hugely happy to see our friends from the Tribune here today, and once they showed up, I had to excise all the trade secrets parts, information from my speech, and I will accept no questions from that table. But two papers, of course, means a lot of things. It means more coverage, it means more debate, it means more scrutiny of government, it means more discussion of public policy and a better democracy. And in the case of the Sun-Times Media, it means that we've got hundreds of extra feet on the street throughout the metro area to bring you what is our unique brand of local and hyper-local coverage. We want to remind you that we have over 400 journalists devoted exclusively to just covering this area. It's an amazing amount of people all throughout the metro area. And as Jeremy alluded to, we've transformed that staff completely in the last year. We are, I like to say, and nobody understands me, but I like to say that we are a metaphysical news company right now. Metaphysical, we are both one and many. Our journalists are still serving individual titles, of course, but they are also reporting into a larger Sun-Times media structure, which allows us to not only more effectively pool and deploy these resources, but it also makes for a much more efficient, seamless, and creative news gathering operation. By doing some simple things like eliminating duplication of efforts and intimately connecting everybody through technology, we've become a very coordinated force that's able to do everything from the big picture stories in Chicago to the local high school board meetings in your hometown. All of this is things we've been doing along the way, but we're able to do it much more effectively, seamlessly, and efficiently than before. Thanks again to our investors and some of the wonderful technology they brought our way, and the much appreciated cooperation from our unions. We have finally, in the last year or so, been able to unlock the interconnected potential of all of our papers, which range from the Pioneer Press weeklies to the Southtown and dailies in Naperville, Aurora, Elgin, Joliet, Waukegan, Merrillville, Indiana, and of course the Sun-Times. Reflecting all of this also are our newly designed websites. I hope you've had a chance to look at them as they've been rolled out over the last couple of months. They're clean, they're crisp, they're easy to navigate, and they are the gateway, of course, to whole new audiences. And happily, those new audiences, including hordes of younger people, are finding us. There's rarely a week that goes by at this point that we don't set some kind of new record for traffic. What's driving all those readers, of course, is what they know they're going to find in the paper and on the websites. And as Jeremy said, our formula is pretty simple. Our specialties include the stuff that we have always done: local news, politics, opinion-leading editorials, investigations, and a classic tabloid sports section. As hard as the recession has hit all businesses, we've taken solace in the fact that our mission and our ambitions have not been affected that much. We are local, local, local. We haven't had to shutter bureaus around the world or around the country. And as news from the world and the nation has become more of a commodity and a little less valuable, what we do is the farthest thing from a commodity. We are producing content that you pretty much can't get anywhere else. It's incredibly valuable and provides one of the last and surest links between readers and news providers. The bond with the readers is also made especially strong by the best collection of columnists this side of the Parthenon. Our columnists are a murderer's row of Chicago's best voices. Just listen to this list: Roger Ebert, Michael Sneed, the Ricks of sports, Rick Tellender and Rick Morrissey, Carol Marine, Mark Brown, Mary Mitchell, Neil Steinberg, Terry Savage, Laura Washington. I'm looking over at our CFO, Brian Linscott, who's adding up all those salaries. I made sure he didn't arrive with a calculator today. And then, you know, there's Lynn Sweet in Washington, a one-man band of energy who seemingly knows everybody in the city. And of course, there's our Hall of Fame City Hall reporter, Fran Spielman. She's literally in the Hall of Fame. She may be the one person who is more energetic, more aggressive, and less afraid of anyone or anything than Rahm Emanuel. We wish the new mayor well with all the challenges that face him, but we're afraid that things like school and pension reform are going to be very easy compared to facing Fran every day. All of that in one place for 75 cents a day. We're here. I wanted to close today by talking about what we may be most proud of, certainly these days, and that is our local reporting. And that's why the Pulitzer Prize for local reporting was so great for us. We were honored for simply doing what it is that we do every day. We are so proud of the fact that we have, probably have noticed this, but we have stripped the fact that we won the 2011 Pulitzer Prize for local reporting across the top of the paper every day. It, of course, got a little competition today, but we've put that on the front of the paper every day. It's going to be there for the rest of the year. We're so proud of it. And those of you who think ahead realize that 2012 is a leap year, so we're going to get an extra day out of it. This was a great category for us to win, and it's one the entire staff, which is led by Don Hayner, the editor-in-chief, has really felt a part of. It involved, what we won for was words and pictures, and there was an online element. It involved a lot of editors putting this together. The prize was also great, especially because we didn't really set out to win it. We didn't set out to win a Pulitzer Prize. Many papers, believe it or not, across the country do just that. They come up with an idea, they throw a lot of resources at it, and they publish big overkill pieces or series that often contain some very, very good work, but often bore the heck out of readers. Our case was different. It was really not until we were actually putting together our entries for the Pulitzer Prize that we began to see the forest through the trees. We realized that we had told, in the course of 2010, a very big story through a series of smaller chapters. The genesis of the prize really goes back to that weekend in 2008 that you might remember, in which there were 40 people in Chicago who were shot over the span of 59 hours, just in one weekend, 40 people shot. 2 years later, in 2010, we decided to go back and look at the aftermath of that weekend. Reporter Mark Conkle went to find out what had happened to the shooters, what had happened to the victims, and what had happened with the police who were involved in all of that mayhem. Amazingly, we found that only 1 out of the 7 murders that were committed that weekend had resulted in charges. It was also evident, we began to find out, that there was a pervasive and pernicious no-snitch code that was at work on the streets of Chicago. Nobody would talk about anything. As a result, fewer than 1 out of 10 non-fatal shootings result in charges being brought in Chicago. The homicide clearance rate is not a whole lot better. Some of our reporting throughout the year also included a heartbreaking story of a 4-year-old boy who was paralyzed by a bullet. Everybody had an idea of what had happened, but again, no one was talking. And then we told another amazing tale, the first as far as police were concerned, in which a young man was gunned down, and as he was about to die, he told police that yes, he knew who did it, but to quote him, "I ain't tellin'." And then he died. The no-snitch code was everywhere. It was thwarting the police, and it could be argued that it was leading to an increase in the violence on our streets. Criminals, of course, are emboldened when they feel invincible. The centerpiece of what ended up winning the award came from another thread of reporting that found our reporter Frank Main and photographer John Kim spending 4 months riding around with homicide detectives from Area 5. The idea was simply to track a homicide from start to finish. The police brass agreed to let us go along for the ride, and Frank is an amazing crime reporter in that he can break news about the police, sometimes very unflattering stuff, and yet they still really like him. So there they were, our guys, on the second shift of the homicide beat on the near northwest side, waiting for a case. They wanted to follow this murder from start to finish. And what happened for 30 or 40 days? Nothing. For more than a month, no murders were being committed. In fact, the police thought our guys were perhaps the best anti-crime weapon ever invented. Every time our guys were on board, nothing happened. Finally, the police caught a case, and our reporters were there every step of the way, from the first call to the bloody scene, to the morgue, to the funeral home, and the investigation. It's unbelievable how these guys were able to get people on the street involved everywhere in the scene to talk, and yet they were talking to our guys, but the no-snitch code was still very much in evidence. The police were completely stymied, and the case didn't really have an ending. Our problem, of course, was in the newsroom. We were intending to write a sort of murder mystery. But we had no answer to who done it. We had no ending to this story. The police hadn't caught anybody. It goes against everything in the storyteller's art. Then we realized that with the dismal murder clearance rate in Chicago, that we were actually sitting on something that was very real. It was all too typical. The situation was very common. Murder happens in Chicago, nobody gets caught, nobody gets investigated, nobody gets charged, nobody goes to prison. The police are unable to make a case, and the crime continues. So we published our stories with no ending. Again, it goes against the storyteller's art, but it was one of the realest things we could do. When it came time to submit our entries for the Pulitzer, editor Paul Saltzman realized that all of this reporting and writing and gripping commentary and narrative was connected. We had done some very stunning work that maybe hadn't changed anything, but it sure showed a light on what was happening in Chicago and why that was maybe happening. There's more drama attached to this than we like to admit. But as we were putting the entry together, we were doing it right on deadline, of course. You've got to have these things postmarked by 5 o'clock on a certain day, so we're assembling everything together. And everything was on target, and that ended up being the day that the blizzard hit Chicago. Suddenly, we were going to have trouble getting to the post office or getting to UPS. The editor and the reporter, Frank Main, trundled out into the snow. They went to the nearest UPS facility, which was long shut. Time was running out. This deadline was approaching. They headed to a slightly larger regional facility. There were only minutes to go, and they arrived just as the doors were shutting. Paul Saltzman practically got down on his snowy knees, and pleaded with the guy to take our package and get it time-stamped. He described what was going on. The guy at UPS was hesitant, but finally he relented, and that's what Brown did for us. We think UPS should build an entire ad campaign around that guy, and then buy ads in the Sun-Times. So the entry was in the mail. And then we waited, and then we won. Some of the commentary surrounding the award said that it read like something out of the TV show The Wire. That was a very great compliment, but that show was about Baltimore, and our stories were among the realest depictions of Chicago ever recorded. Like I say, it's what we do, and we're here. Thank you very much.
All right. Nice story. By the way, if all of you are here, if you submit a sheet of paper, you can get 3 credit hours in World Civ, Western Civ. By the way, since that table's over there, obviously you forgot one thing, the end of the Cold War. But we'll move on. Dawn, I'm telling you, tough crowd. Tough crowd. I had my students here, they'd be hysterical. We have Bill Seath, member. Wow. While digital media manages to get info to the consumer, it lacks the appeal of the paper. In look, content, and feel, in your transition to digital media, how do you plan to address this shortcoming, if at all? Kindly keep the questions a tad shorter. Don't jump at either one. Golden Eagle, you going first?
Yeah, I will. You know, I think that comment is right on the money. I mean, traditionally the online versions of newspapers have contained menus of stories. Everything on the website almost had the same weight and feel. Everything was kind of a list of stories. One of the great joys of editing newspapers is about putting together display, editing pictures in a way to get maximum appeal, splashing things across the tops of pages, using typography and big headlines. You know, it's hard to scream on a website the way we're able to do in a tabloid every day. I think that is beginning to change, however. I think, you know, as time goes on, on, that the websites are becoming more and more creative. They are becoming more adaptable to showing stories, showing the different weights of stories. There is now a lot more editing that is going on in terms of presentation on the website. And of course, the other thing to remember is that with the advent of the larger screen devices, the tablets and the iPads, or et cetera, is that they are coming very close all of a sudden to, in some ways, mimicking that traditional newspaper look and feel. It's, again, not something where I'm hidebound saying everything's got to be on ink and paper, but there is something to be said about the way news is packaged. It's not just a menu of stories. It is packaged in a unique way, and I think that the tablets are going to help us bridge that gap.
Okay. Dan Prof, where are you? Raise your hand. Citizen. Okay. I will do this in French. No. Dawn, it doesn't work. Yeah. Thank God we got Dawn here. All right. Per your emphasis on local, should we worry about the lack of newspapers in a community like Harvey or Proviso Township? What does this mean for the civic society?
I think, I don't know if we do not necessarily have papers, local papers in those towns. I do believe that there are publishers who are covering that that part of the Chicago area. Usually there is something in every town, but the germ of the question is about the importance of these newspapers to these communities, and I think they are essential to democracy, to informing people about what's going on, to knowing what's happening in their government. And I think that if some of these towns are underserved, it definitely does underserve those people, and it underserves the larger democracy. I'm for newspapers, and I wish they would be in all of these towns. If they're not, somebody needs to move in there.
It's always a concern, Hassan. If anyone in any community, be it in Chicago or elsewhere, does not feel they're being provided the local information they need to have to be a responsible citizen. Sadly, as our industry has evolved, some of those smaller communities simply don't have the economic support to support traditional newspapers. And I think what we can all look forward to, we think sooner than later, is an electronic solution to those issues. We've talked to lots of vendors, lots of providers out there who have a lot of interesting ideas. They need to be economically viable. Sometime soon they will be. So I think the solution will probably be more electronic for communities like Proviso than traditional print.
Okay, former Alderman Bert Nataris, sitting right in front. You guys could answer this or you could avoid it. To what extent did the dealings of David Radler contribute to your present problems?
Well, I don't know that we have any present problems. We put those behind us when we entered and emerged from bankruptcy. But definitely some of the deals, the dealings, the complicated undertakings that David Radler and Comrade Black were involved with, not really involving Chicago, but really involving the sale of newspapers in Canada, a decade or so ago. That's really what caused a huge part of our problem. The bad deals, the problems never really emanated from Chicago, but because we were connected to that larger company at that time, we were affected by it. But along with bankruptcy, along with our purchase by our new investors, those problems are gone, and we're singing a new song.
Okay, last question. Dawn Clark Netsch has the honors. Many of us, I assume you mean yourself too, many of us worry about the current and future generations of good reporters, journalists, with the electronic age, with the coming of the electronic age. Will the quality change? I amended it a little. Will the quality change?
Boy, I hope not. And there's a couple of very good developments out there. As I mentioned earlier, first of all, to have journalists, you have to have people who are interested in reading them. The good news in the digital age that we're finding is that young kids are certainly getting their news in a different way. And while the average audience for a newspaper itself may be 44 or 45 years of age and older, the younger kids are not incurious. They are still interested in news. They are just getting it in a different way. So I do think we have a new echelon of readers who are coming up. I'd be very worried if kids were not interested in news or were incurious. They are not. By the same token, I do some work with some various universities, and I look at some statistics around the country. And journalism schools, if they are not journalism or communication schools, if they are not at record levels of enrollment right now, are darn close to it. This is a area of study that shows no lack of enrollment, of people who are interested in it. They may not all be going to radio stations, TV stations, newspapers, or magazines like they used to. They'll be going into different areas, different platforms, but there is no shortage of people signing up for these schools. And what the schools are teaching is not only the modern tools that they need, but people are always going to need to know what a story is. They're going to know. They need to know how to write a story, how to ask questions, how to interview people, how to package that news, and that is all still being taught. And I don't care what platform you're eventually looking at, you are still going to be wanting information that contains those elements and is presented in that way.
And I think as a result, the quality of journalism as we know it today, and as everyone in this room has become so accustomed to and has continued to expect will continue. There will be no lack of extraordinary professional journalists out there who are interested in doing this work. The challenge is not, to John's point, wondering if we're going to have enough people. The challenge is going to be, and it's a challenge we are all fully capable of meeting, for people such as at the Chicago Tribune or at Sun-Times Media, is to determine and figure out business processes and ways to support that journalism. What we tell our folks at Sun-Times Media almost every day, but certainly every chance we get, that the reason we come to work every day and the reason we work as hard as we do every day is to figure out that question. Not just so we selfishly or the Tribune selfishly can have a good, successful, profitable business, but because it's absolutely essential to the functioning of our society as we know it.
How about a nice round of applause?